and today we're going to have a lesson about verbs, and not just any kind of verb, but special verbs called stem-changing verbs. So far you've been working with regular AR, ER, and IR verbs, and by regular we mean that they follow the same pattern. So you drop the AR, ER, or IR, the ending, and then add the appropriate endings according to the type of infinitive, whether it's AR, ER, or IR. But the verbs that we're going to focus on today have something really special that happens in their stem, which is why they're called stem-changing verbs. And so we're going to take a look at what that means. But first I want to remind you about the parts of a verb because it's really important to understand the fundamentals in order to fully understand how these verbs work. So let's take a look at this verb. The verb is querer. Repiten, querer. All right, so querer means to want or to love, and we're going to talk about this special stem-changing verb in a minute and how to work with these verbs, but for now I want to do a quick review on the parts of a verb, the parts of an infinitive verb. So we've talked in the past that a verb can be split into two parts, the stem or the root, and the ending. Remember, the endings for verbs in Spanish are AR, ER, and IR. The stem is what tells us the information, the meaning, or the action of the verb. And the ending tells us who does that action. And so today we're talking about verbs that have a change in their stem. And there are three kinds of stem-changing verbs in Spanish. Now, you've already seen a stem-changing verb, but we didn't call attention to it because we hadn't learned stem-changing verbs yet. But if you remember the verb tener, see, tener means to have, and this is a partial stem changer. So you remember the funky change that happened in some of the conjugations of tener? So tener is a partial stem-changing verb, and so we've kind of seen this concept before, but we haven't called attention to it. You just had to memorize the conjugations. But we're going to learn about stem-changing verbs, and again, as I said, there are three kinds of stem changers in Spanish, and we have verbs that change from E to IE, from E to I, and from O to UE. Now, stem-changing verbs are so common in Spanish. There are hundreds, thousands of stem-changing verbs in Spanish. And they're so common that the dictionary even gives you a clue as to whether or not a verb is a stem changer. So when you look up a verb in the dictionary or even in your textbook, you're going to see two little vowels or one vowel sometimes in a parentheses after the verb. That indicates that it's a stem-changing verb. So if you look up a verb in the dictionary or you see a verb in your book and it has a vowel or vowels in parentheses, that indicates that this verb is a stem-changing verb, meaning that the vowel in the stem is going to change. And this is a linguistic process that happens because of Spanish's, the evolution from Latin to Spanish. And so whenever stress falls on the stem vowel, it causes the vowel to turn into a diphthong and change. So stem-changing verbs are verbs that their stem vowel changes. And what I mean by stem vowel is it's going to be the vowel at the end of the stem, typically. So in this case, the end of the stem ends here with the R. The stem vowel is the E. So the E, as we see here, querer is an E to IE stem changer. So this E is going to change to an IE when we conjugate it. Let's take a look at this process and some common stem-changing verbs, and we'll go a little bit more into detail about the conjugation. So the first category of stem-changing verbs and the most common type of stem-changing verb are verbs that their stem vowel, the last vowel in the stem, changes from E to IE. So let's repeat some of these vowels so we can understand the pronunciation, and then we'll talk about how to work with them. All right, repiten, cerrar, cerrar. Cerrar means to close. See, like close your book, close the door. See? The next two verbs both mean to begin. See, to begin class, to begin your test. See? So, repiten, comenzar, empezar. All right, our next verb means to understand. Do you understand stem changing verbs? Maybe not yet, but you will. All right, so, repiten, entender. Our next verb is to think, and that is pensar. All right, next up we have perder. And perder means to lose or to miss, like to miss the bus or to miss a train, right? So perder is to lose. All right, our next verb is preferir. And you'll see that it's very similar to the word in English, to prefer. Preferir is to prefer. And our last verb is querer, and that's the one that I showed you here. Querer means to want or to love. When we're talking about an object, a thing, we'd say, I want pizza, okay? It means to love when we're talking about a person. So if I want to say, I love my mom, right, I would use querer to indicate to love when I'm talking about a person. So querer means to want, and it also means to love. It means to want when we're talking about an object or a thing, and it means to love when we're talking about a person. All right, so stem changing verbs, again, are verbs whose stem vowel changes. And these are E to IE verbs, which means that the E in the stem vowel, is going to change from, the E is going to change to an IE in these conjugations. Quiero, quieres, quiere, queremos, queréis, and quieren. Now, you'll notice that the nosotros and the vosotros forms do not stem change. This happens in all stem-changing verbs. The nosotros form and the vosotros form used in Spain, the vosotros used in Spain and the nosotros form will never stem change. And the reason is because the stress doesn't fall on the stem vowel in these conjugations. So you'll never stem change in the nosotros or the vosotros forms. Now, you're probably wondering why I have these outlined like this. It's not just to indicate that we don't stem change the nosotros or the vosotros forms, but these verbs are sometimes referred to as shoe verbs or boot verbs. So I drew a little boot here to help you see that image. And this is a fun way, sometimes a helpful way for some students to remember that the nosotros and the vosotros forms don't stem change. So you can think of it, maybe there's not enough room in the boot or the shoe to fit those conjugations in there. All right, let's take a look at E to I stem changing verbs. First, let's look at the verbs themselves, and then we'll talk about how to conjugate these verbs. Repiten, conseguir, repetir, decir, seguir, pedir. So conseguir means to get, repetir is to repeat, decir is to say or to tell, seguir means to follow, and pedir is to ask for. See? So when you go to a restaurant, you might pedir some comida, some food, right? Okay, so let's take a look at the verb repetir. You'll notice here, so we have our stem, which goes all the way to the T, and we have two E's here. And so you're thinking, okay, so how do I know which E? Remember, the vowel that changes in stem changing verbs is the last vowel at the end of the stem. So the vowel closest to the end of the stem is going to stem change. So it's going to be the second E in this case. So the conjugation of repetir, we just replace that E with the I, in all of the conjugations except for the nosotros and vosotros forms. Remember, those will never stem change. So let's go over these conjugations. Repito. Repites. Repite. Repetimos. Repetís. Repiten. So again, when you're changing the stem, you're going to change the stem vowel that's closest to the end of the stem. And something to remember, if you're having a hard time, you're like, okay, I know this verb is a stem changing verb, but I don't remember if it's an E to IE or an E to I stem changer. Well, I have some help for you. Only IR verbs are E to I stem changers. Only IR verbs are E to I stem changers. Now, not every single IR verb is an E to I stem changer, because if you look here, preferir is an E to IE. So IR verbs can be different kinds of stem changers, but E to I, verbs that change E to I, can only ever be IR verbs. Okay, so hopefully that will come in handy for you for the future. All right, our third kind of stem changer are verbs that change to UE in the stem. And we're going to go over the pronunciation and meaning of some of the more common verbs that change to a UE. So, repiten: almorzar, contar, dormir, encontrar, mostrar, poder, recordar, volver. Okay, so almorzar means to have lunch. So if you want to say I have lunch, you just drop the AR, add your normal endings like you have all along, and you're just going to change the O to a UE when you conjugate it, except for the nosotros and vosotros forms. So we'll look at this in just a second. Contar means to count, like I count money. Dormir is to sleep. Encontrar is to find. Mostrar is to show. Poder is to be able to or can. Recordar is to remember. And volver is to return. Now, let's take a look at almorzar when conjugating it. So we see that the O is our stem vowel, okay? So the O is going to change to a UE whenever we conjugate it. But again, not in the nosotros and vosotros forms. Those don't fit inside the boot. The stress doesn't fall on the stem vowel in that case, so they will never stem change. So let's listen to the conjugation of this verb. Almuerzo, almuerzas, almuerza, almorzamos, almorzáis, almuerzan. So, you're going to find that the stem changing verbs, you're still going to drop the AR, drop the ER, and drop the IR, and add on the same endings that you've learned all along. Nothing is changing with the ending of the verb, okay? So all of the ways that you've learned to conjugate so far, drop the AR, drop the ER, drop the IR, and add your endings. O, as, a, amos, ais, an. O, es, e, emos, eis, en. O, es, e, imos, is, en. You're still going to conjugate that exactly the same on the ending. The only thing that's changing here is that the stem vowel, the vowel closest to the end of the stem, is going to change either from E to IE, from E to I, or from O to UE. So that is a stem changing verb. There's one more stem changing verb that's very, very common, and it falls into the O to UE category even though it's not an O to UE changer. It's a UE changer. We include it in the category because it does change to UE. So the verb jugar means to play. It's a very common word in both English and Spanish, to play sports, to play a game, right? So the U, which is the stem vowel in this case, is going to change to a UE when we conjugate it. The endings are all going to stay exactly the same for an AR verb, just like you've seen all along. And remember that we don't stem change in the nosotros or the vosotros forms. So let's take a look at the pronunciation of this verb. Juego, juegas, juega, jugamos, jugáis, and juegan. Also, something to note about this verb is that you will follow it with the preposition a, followed by the article el or la. See? So if you want to say, I play golf, juego al golf or al tenis. See? So you're going to follow it with the preposition a. All right, so a quick recap. Stem changing verbs are verbs whose stem vowel changes either from E to IE, E to I, or O to UE. And the stem vowel that changes is going to be the vowel closest to the end of the stem. The reason that this happens in Spanish is because of its evolution from Latin. Whenever stress falls or fell on the stem vowel, it would cause it to change. Okay? And the nosotros and vosotros forms will never stem change because the stress doesn't fall on the stem vowel there. And you can also think of it that there's not enough room in the boot. And sometimes you will hear stem changing verbs referred to as either shoe verbs or boot verbs, which is again why I have it drawn out here for you like a shoe. Okay, clase, that's the lesson for stem changing verbs. Reach out to me if you have any questions and I will be happy to help you. ¡Hasta luego!